My name is Dianne James, and I live in Hyannisport. Well, going way back to when I was just a little girl, my fond memory is of my mother, my brother and sister, who were twins, and I, walking from our house in Centerville down to Craigville Beach. And there was no parking lot there. It was just beach grass, and we'd go through the beach grass and go down on the sand and play in the sand all day. And sometimes we would go in the water with my mother, but we were only like, my brother and sister are only a year younger than I, so it was like a bunch of little kids having fun at the beach, and there was nobody else around. My dad was from Medford, Mass. He was a Boston Irish guy who came down here. He was a certified public accountant, and he came down to do some accounting work at the Hyannis Trust Company right on Main Street, which was subsequently the Cape Cod Bank and Trust, and now is TD Bank North. My mother was from Worcester, and she came down to visit with her parents, who were living on Pearl Street, where the Brazilian restaurant is now. And my grandfather opened the first drugstore in the town of Barnstable. It was called the Liggett Rexall drugstore, and he was the pharmacist. My mother came down to help him, and a friend of my dad said he knew this nice girl that was over at the drugstore, and if he'd like, he could introduce them. And my dad said, let's go check out the drugstore first, and then we'll see. But that was where they met, and they, even though they went together for a long time, my mother was always, she always recognized that there were girls from Boston who used to drive down in convertible cars to see my dad, and it didn't set too well with her. I remember one thing that my mother used to tell me from the time I was a young girl, that she and my dad used to go down to the Cape Cod Canal and on an evening, and they would watch the submarine races. And I never really realized that that was a joke. I thought that was, well, that was interesting to do. But it was a joke. I graduated in 1956, and in those days you went to Barnstable High School from the time you were in 7th grade until you graduated. So there were 6 years that you were in the high school. I loved school. I loved it from the time I was in 1st grade. I loved the fact that when I was in 7th grade, I knew people who were seniors. And nowadays, I know I have a friend who was a senior, and he was a basketball player. And I felt like he was my friend. Now they're worried about 7th and 8th graders being thrown in with these old kids. And I don't understand that, because that was fun for me. And I had so many friends, and I did everything in school, and I loved the teachers, I loved the work that we did, and I got a very good education. Even though there were 123 students in my class, we did everything we could do. And when I went away to college, I found that I was well prepared. I went to Wellesley College, and I got a master's degree from Lesley University. I became a teacher after my husband and I were married and had our children. I had, prior to that, worked at the United Nations in New York. After I went to college, I moved to New York with 3 friends, and we had an apartment on West 30th Street. And I worked at the UN for 3 years. And then I worked at Columbia University for the Dean of Faculty for a year. And then when my husband and I were deciding to get married and where would we live, he was really pulling for Cape Cod. And he's a big bird lover, and he said it would be so lovely to live on Cape Cod. But I said, that place is the sticks. There's nothing to do. And we had been living on West 30th Street. So if we wanted to go to a Broadway play, all we had to do was walk down to 42nd Street. So I said, I'll try it for a year. And that's how we finally came down here, and haven't left yet. I was, in the beginning, it was because my family was here. My brother was here, my mother and dad were here, and my sister had moved away to Sudbury, Massachusetts. But, and then, you know, I joined the women's club, and little by little, my life was different from the way it was when I was in school. But I love it now, and my kids love it. My daughter runs her father's insurance agency, and she lives about 3 miles away from us. And my son, who is an architect, lives in Natick, but he comes down here. He has a house down here and comes down every chance he gets with his family, his wife and his 2 little kids. So he didn't want to be away from Cape Cod at all. I had no background in teaching. When I got out of college, I had been an English major, and but when I decided that I wanted to work, I wanted to do something, I started to work with a woman named Eleanor Martin, who was starting a learning disabilities program in the town, and that was around 1970, 71. And she said she couldn't promise me a job after I took the course with her, but she would like to have me, you know, take the course, so I did. And during that time, I decided that was what I wanted to do. So that's when I went back to Leslie and got my master's degree. And when I came back, I got a job. I was actually looking for a job in an elementary school, but I went for an interview with Walter Waney at the Barnstable High School. And so he interviewed me, and then I had interviews with other elementary school principals. But when I came home, there was a call from his secretary, saying he would like to hire me in the special education department. So I started there and was there in the special education department for about 3 years, and then I moved to the English department. And then in 1987, I went to the elementary school. Finally, what I really wanted to do, and I was at Osterville Elementary until I retired in 2000. I've loved it. When I was deciding to retire, one of the guidance counselors at the school said, "I'm so surprised that you're retiring." And I said, "Well, I look around and I see, you know, everybody is a lot younger, and I'm just thinking I should retire." And he said, "Well, you know, the best time to leave a party is when you're still having fun." Oh, my boss was always my father. My dad had all of us working for him from the time we practically could walk. We used to pick dandelions. That was my real first job. And that was if you said that you were bored. Oh, that was a very bad thing to say, because he would cure that right away. And picking dandelions was one of the things we would do. But really, he ran the White Elephant restaurant, hotel in Nantucket before I was born. Oh, no, actually, no, it wasn't. It was around the end of the 30s, around 1939, 1940. Then he ran the Southwood Inn, and I worked there as a relish girl. And I took relish around to the tables, and I helped bus the tables, and I was about 13, I'd say, then. And then he bought the Crosby Mansion, which is now more well known as the Crosby Mansion, but when he ran the hotel, it was called the Gold Coast Inn. And my brother and sister and I all worked all summer at that hotel. And we put in a lot of hours and we got paid. But those jobs were always the ones that I had until the time I was in college. And at that time, I worked at a store down in the west end of Hyannis. It sold Scandinavian clothes, Marimekko clothes, Scandinavian pottery, and Jackie Kennedy and Ethel and the crowd used to come in to buy things there. And that was the summer before JFK became president. And Jackie was just a lovely person. But that was a job I always remember. Oh, went on the map almost overnight. I remember when I first went to college and people asked me where I was from, I didn't know what to tell them. I couldn't say Centerville, but because they wouldn't know what that was. And even Cape Cod. I mean, I remember a girl that came up to me and she said, Lida Dawson, Jefferson City, Missouri. I said, hi, Lida. She said, now, who are you? And I said, I'm Dianne Horgan, and I'm from, I don't know what to say. Cape Cod? Where's that? So all of a sudden, when the Kennedys came on the scene, everybody knew where Cape Cod was, and Hyannisport. So it changed a lot. When my dad was teaching school at Barnstable High School during the late 30s, he decided he needed to have another job because teaching school was not very lucrative. So he bought an insurance agency that was being sold by J.W. Grace Company. And he started that agency at 28 Barnstable Road, which is at the end of North Street on the corner of Barnstable Road. And ran that agency in addition to all these other jobs that he had. In the summers, he was in Nantucket or in Orleans, and he had a very good secretary who was named Myrtle Baker, and she ran that agency and called him, but he was always doing something else. But my brother, after my brother graduated from college, he went into the agency with my dad, and then when we moved to Cape Cod, my husband is a civil engineer, and he had been working on big highway construction projects in New York. But when we moved down here, my dad convinced him first that he could maybe build houses, which he did for a while, and then that he should come into the business. And my brother was happy about that, and he and my dad joined with my husband and changed the name to Horgan James Insurance Agency. And then about 15 or 20 years ago, they separated the agencies, buying the Leonard Agency in Osterville, so that my brother's son could run one agency and our daughter could run the Leonard Agency, and that's what's going on now. My daughter is interesting because she has about 5 customer service reps in her office, and she does a great job over there in Osterville. The thing I think is great is that she takes her employees out for a girls' night out a couple of times a year to a spa, and they have pedicures, manicures, facials, hairdos. It's nice. That's the benefit of having a woman as your boss. Our daughter worked for commercial union, I believe, insurance company. She was a claims adjuster after she got out of college. She went into the insurance industry, but she worked outside of Boston. She was a claims adjuster. And during Hurricane Bob down here, there were so many claims because that was such a devastating hurricane that my husband asked her if she would come down and help him in the office with the claims. And so she did. And then, when that was over, he asked her if she might like to stay in the office. And she was like, well, not much going on at Cape Cod. I, like being outside the city in Boston. But eventually she decided to come down. And I think she's happy. Yeah, she is happy. Well, I think the Hyannis Library really needs all the help it can get. I mean, it's really fighting against parking, the parking problem there, and there's a lot of things. The library is great, and the little house that was built in the 18th century that we have the used bookstore in now is just sweet, and people who come in love to look at it. But with the other libraries in town, the Centerville Library and the Osterville Library, having such big contributions and building their libraries up, I feel like the Hyannis Library, needs support. It really does. I guess I would have to say fall. Um, I, you know, spring is nice, but I think fall, and I've always liked the fall, and that's a funny reason because I always was going back to school in the fall, which was what I love to do. And I like the leaves, and I like the brisk air after the summer and the lack of humidity, and fall would be the answer for that one. That's a really difficult question because I don't really think of most of my days as very exciting, but most the most rewarding day I had was both times when my children were born over in the Cape Cod Hospital. I remember when my daughter was born in March, and in those days there weren't a lot of stores open or anything, and I believe it was a Sunday, and my husband appeared in the room with a couple of dozen daffodils in March. It was pretty exciting. The place that we go to a lot is Ocean Street. We drive down there often in the morning, sit and have coffee and watch the boats, the fishing boats that come and go, and see what's going on with the Nantucket boats. For years, our son ran boats to Nantucket for Highline. And so we kind of got used to going down there and either seeing him off or seeing when he came back and having, you know, dinner down there at the Harbor House or at Spanky's. And so we still go back there, even though he's not running the boats anymore. Well, I think the town has made a big effort to improve Main Street, which is an important area. I mean, people love to come to Cape Cod, and they love to come to this town because Main Street has nice shops, it has wonderful restaurants, and all the flowers they put along Main Street in the summer has really improved it. From the time that we came back here, my husband and I, in the 60s, I think the town has just pulled itself up by its bootstraps, and it's doing well. Well, you mentioned the fact that I'm very interested in education, and I am concerned, first of all, that we've had to close so many elementary schools, and I'm also concerned about having the high school become too big. My daughter's class had 500 students in it, just one class. And now I see Sturgis doing so well. And instead of increasing the size of the building, they built another building. So now it's like two separate schools with 300 kids in each school. And when I went to school, I don't remember exactly how many kids there were, but in my class there were 123, and I knew everybody. I still do. And I'm just worried, my daughter doesn't, though, 500 kids in her class, she knows a handful. But I don't think it's right to have such big schools. That's a big challenge. I would like to see it not keep increasing, and I don't know, not much I can do about it. I'm Dianne James, and I live in Hyannisport.